In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew a mesh front pouch. The materials list for this project are a piece of fabric, a piece of mesh, a section of coil zipper, and a zipper slider. To start this project, it's important to identify the right and wrong sides of fabric and the zipper. This is the right side of the fabric. It's what will be seen in the finished product. On the other side is the wrong side. It's what will be on the inside. For the zipper, this is the right side, and this is the wrong side. That's important because we're going to sew with right sides together, and that will make sense when we do step 2. But first, step 1. We're going to align the two pieces, the one of fabric and one of mesh, to verify which side we're going to be sewing on. You'll notice that the mesh is longer in this dimension than the fabric, but it's the same in this direction. So this side is slightly longer, and this is the side we're going to be sewing the zipper on. So we'll set the mesh aside, and we'll sew the zipper onto this edge of the fabric. And we're going to do right sides together to sew that. What I'll do is use a few clips to hold the zipper to the fabric. This makes it easier to sew with one less thing to think about, not having to keep them aligned as we sew. So I'll go ahead and put that under the presser foot, lower the presser foot. I'm going to turn the hand wheel. Oh, I didn't have it in the right place before, so it pulled out. I'm going to go ahead and rethread that so we can move forward. That's actually good that that happened because it illustrates why it's important to turn your hand wheel and position the needle correctly when you're done sewing, is so it doesn't do that. It's a real inconvenience to have it pull out when you're ready to start sewing. So that tip is covered in my video about tips for beginners. So with this in place, I'm going to go ahead and sew. I'll do a few stitches forward and then reverse. On this machine, it's pushing this knob in. Then I'll sew, removing the clips as I get to them. Very little is needed from my hand as the machine is pulling the fabric through. I only need to make sure it doesn't become misaligned. So my hand here is only for small adjustments, not for pushing down or pushing in. I'll sew to the edge of the fabric, reverse again, turn my hand wheel so the needle is coming down, then I can lift and remove the workpiece. I'll cut near the workpiece, leaving long tails for when I start again. I'll trim off the thread from the beginning. Now I'm going to run another set of stitches. This will be a top stitch along this edge here. I'll do a finger press to kind of get it into place. The fold of the fabric will sit right up against the teeth of the zipper. I'll place it back under the presser foot and lower it so that the edge of the presser foot is riding up against the coil teeth. And I'll use those as my guide because I don't have clips holding this in place. I'll go ahead and put my needle into the fabric and then start sewing a few stitches forward and a back stitch before I continue sewing the balance of this line. No need to go fast, slow and steady will do the job. At the end, another back stitch. Get that needle in the right place, and out it comes. I like to trim the excess thread as I go to keep the project tidy. That's step 1 and 2. Now we'll repeat those two same steps for the mesh. The mesh doesn't have a right or wrong side, so simply place that up against the edge of the zipper and clip into place just like we did with the fabric. Now you'll notice I don't put a clip right at the beginning because I'm going to put that under the presser foot and that will hold it in place. Now it's probably a little difficult to see, but underneath the mesh is the coil teeth, and the edge of the presser foot is right up against that, and that will be the guide for me sewing straight. So just like before, the needle's in the fabric. I'll do a few stitches forward, a back stitch, and then sew the length of the fabric and the mesh. Again, no need to go fast. Slow works just as well. When I get to the end of the back stitch, needle starting to come down, and then I can remove my workpiece. As always, I like to trim. I'll do another finger press to get the fabric set in place to some extent before I put that underneath the presser foot. Same as before, I'm using the edge of the coil as a guide against the presser foot to keep things straight. A few stitches forward, a few back to lock the stitches in place, and then I'll sew the full length. I'm keeping the presser foot up against those teeth to keep a straight line. These two passes of top stitching are the only stitches that will be seen on the final finished bag. And that's what it looks like. We're now ready to put the zipper onto the fabric. We're ready to put the slider, rather, onto the zipper. I'll show two different ways to do this. The first is a little bit more difficult, but what I'll do is I'll pull apart the zipper to about halfway. I'm going to take the slider and hold it between my fingers by the tab so there's not a lot of movement here, so I can hold it steady. The zipper needs to go in kind of like a V, and it will come out straight. If you try and put it in with them parallel, it will give you grief. So the way I do that is I put the zipper on one side and then turn it to kind of make that V shape and stick the other half in. Once both halves are in, I can simply pull it on. Now I say simply, it won't be that easy on your first attempt. I've done this a few times. That's one way to put the zipper on. I'll pull that off and I'll show you the second way. The other method is to use this contraption, which is a fork that I've bent. I drilled a hole and attached this clamp. This clamp attaches to my table, and now I'll use the fork's tines to hold the slider for me. What I'm doing is I'm putting the handle, or the pull, between the tines and locking it down. That's now held in place. It's essentially the same. I'll pull out about half of the zipper. I'll hold both sides and feed them in that V shape into the zipper. Then I'm going to tighten it a little bit more so it doesn't come up. Then I'll just pull down, and that puts the zipper on, just like that. Again, you'll probably find this more convenient and easy than the other method, though it's worth trying because it's a good skill to have to be able to put a zipper on quickly and conveniently. So with the slider on, we're ready to close the pouch up. What we'll do is we'll fold it over, align the corners, and then we'll clip it. Here it is clipped. I've only used 3. You can use more if that makes you feel more comfortable. What we're going to do is we're going to start at this corner. We're going to sew, pivot, and then sew to the end. We'll backstitch the beginning and the end. I was pointing there. We'll backstitch the beginning and the end. When we get to the corners, we'll turn with the needle plunged into the material. I'll show you what that looks like. I'll put the edge of the presser foot up against the edge of the material, And that's what my seam allowance will be. Seam allowance just means how far away from the edge I'm sewing. Like before, I'll stitch forward, a few stitches back to lock it in place, and then I'll sew the balance of what I have to do. Now, this is the zipper, and there's plastic teeth in there, and that can be a little intimidating. So the best thing to do is just to go slow over that. If you're really concerned, you can always turn the hand wheel and manually walk over that zipper, but this machine does fine just to sew right over it. When I get to the corner, I'm going to leave the needle down, lift the presser foot, and pivot. Now I'm not quite where I want to be. I'm going to do one more stitch. I'll just do that by turning the hand wheel. And then I can sew this edge. Do one more. There we go. Right over that zipper, no problem. A few back stitches, and we're ready to pull that out. That's all of the sewing on the bag. The rest of what needs to be done is to do a little bit of trimming. With a pair of scissors, I'll trim off any excess zipper I have. There's no need for that. I'm also going to notch the corner so there's less material here for when we turn it inside out. It will make the corners sharper. So I snip those off, making sure I don't snip too close to nick those threads. I need those threads to be intact. We'll cut off this excess zipper as well, and then a little notch at the corner. There's a view of the whole thing, nipped corners and all. Now we're going to turn it right side out. So we'll just open that zipper and turn it. I'm going to have to stop the video because I don't have my turning tool. Or I'll just do it the wrong way and show you and know that there's a better way. I'm going to use the tip of the scissors to just work the corner out. You see how much sharper that is than it is when I don't do that? The risk with scissors is because they have a very acute point, you risk punching a hole in your fabric. So I'm being very delicate. In the class, what you'll use is a little bone folder or a turning tool. It's plastic, though they are sometimes made of bone, and it's a little more blunt, and so there's less risk of damaging your fabric or your finished product. So there it is, our zipper pouch sewn in just a handful of steps.